The school continues to find ways of roping in the first years as we get into episode 11 of Kageki Shojo. And this is my thoughts on the episode, so let's jump right into it. Yeah, seeming a lot more calmer episode this time around. Really kind of centered around the idea of kind of finding inspiration in how to act a certain role. As we find out, there's a rumor going around that during this particular year's cultural festival, which is supposedly supposed to be some kind of graduation show, they decided for this year, for the first time, they're going to have the first years perform a role during the ceremony, and they only get 15 minutes to do it. So this means only 4 of the actual classmates, 4 out of the 40 of them, will actually get to play a role in a Romeo and Juliet play. So they're only going to have 4 of these characters. They're going to play out the same role they did during that mock play they did. So obviously, you'd think there'd be a little bit of tension regarding the fact there's only 4 roles available, and so only 4 girls can actually do anything. But even still, I was actually surprised at just how little tension we actually had during this whole ordeal. Obviously, each one of them are trying to figure out which role they want to play, and there's a little bit of kind of subject behind that itself. Like, particularly, Sarasa doesn't really know which role she wants to play. But while different people are obviously telling certain people, you know, you should do this role. Like with Ai, specifically, she wanted to play the nurse's role, but Hijiri basically pushes her to go all out. Like, your role should be Juliet, nothing less. You are the prettiest girl. Everybody wants to see the JPX girl up there. They are not looking for you to do the nurse's role. You have to go all out. You have to make it to the finish line. And so her basically pushing her a little bit makes Ai decide to be the Juliet role. Whereas somebody like Sarasa is kind of more struggling with the concept of things that she wants to do based on what other people have told her in the past. She ends up actually getting a call from Akiya telling her, well, just do what role you want to do. And she's like, well, that's the problem. I don't know which role I want to do. And he's like, well, okay, have you ever had anybody tell you to do one specific role and then you told yourself, no, I don't really want to do that role? It's because you want to do something else. And what it ends up turning into, which I thought was actually pretty interesting, is that Sarasa actually decides to do the role as almost a revenge. She wants to play Tybalt again, but in order to basically show Ando that she has grown. It's almost like here's the second round. Here's my comeback story, basically. Like, I can do better, and I'm going to show Ando that I can do Tybalt right. But what's interesting, what came from this afterwards, obviously the other struggle that she ends up having is that technically Sawa was going for Tybalt also. So now we have basically a rivalry between the two of them. But not only that, but also following this scene, we also have this situation where Sarasa doesn't really know what to do with Tybalt. Obviously, the thing that she learned last time is that she needs to perform her own Tybalt. And so when she's sitting with Ai in their room, she's basically running through all these concepts. Like, okay, let me spitball different ways of doing Tybalt. And so she does a basic Tybalt. She does a, what was the one, like a prideful Tybalt or something like that, and then a smart Tybalt. She's like, well, you can't change the lines. You can make it your own, but you can't change the lines. They have to remain the same. And so this turns into kind of like a soul searching, so to speak. Like, she has to figure out, well, what would Tybalt think? Like, what would... I think that's basically what I turned it into was, okay, from what my mother has told me, because her mother was an actor. Well, she didn't tell Sarasa what my mother said. She said that she learned something from this actress. What her mother basically told Ida was this idea of she was watching a show and this lady was being overly acting. She's like, this lady's overdoing it. She's basically screaming, look at me. She's no longer lost in the character. And so similarly with Ai and with Sarasa, they both have the same predicament. What is my character thinking? Well, with Sarasa, Tybalt's always thinking about the fact that he never showed his love. He always kept it hidden. And the fact that he was also had a grudge. He was jealous. At the same time, Ai is realizing, well, Juliet is experiencing love. Well, what is love? So both of them have these feelings that they have to portray, but they don't know how to portray it. Ai doesn't know love, or so she doesn't think so. And Sarasa has never had a grudge, or so she thinks. So with Sarasa's perspective, it was cute because it got into the whole story with basically the only time she ever had a grudge, and that was with Akiya. The moment that she was told that she couldn't do kabuki and that Akiya was going to go practice and stuff, she wished harm to Akiya because she was jealous. And then she wanted Akiya to get injured so he never had to go ever again. He would have to quit kabuki. And at the same time, Ai is experiencing this idea of, well, what is love? I can't figure it out. It's running through her mind like crazy. And then she finally realized this moment that Sarasa reached out, acting as Romeo, and inspired her to become her friend, that was technically almost a portrayal of love. In remembering that moment, it taps into her and she actually performs really well, which definitely surprises a lot of people. I mean, specifically, we had Aya, who during this entire episode has been struggling. Aya in this particular episode is really kind of unsure of herself. And it was kind of interesting because several times we had Hoshino actually reprimand her for that. Like, stop downplaying yourself. This is a kill or be killed type of industry, and if you keep acting like, well, I just want to sing, well, I'm not really trying for a role, you're gonna lose, and you need to basically step it up. And this even happens after Ai performs because Aya is actually doing the same role. She's doing Juliet, and so she's immediately thinking, it's over. I can't beat that. And then here's Hoshino walking in again and saying, stop that. Everybody in this room is thinking the same thing you're thinking. It's just we're still going to go try, which I thought was pretty cool. So a few interesting things did happen in this episode, even though, like I said, I think it was a pretty straightforward episode. I don't really think anything was really pushing anything, but I did kind of find it interesting that at some point they had the actual teacher's lounge, and they were talking about how, man, I can feel the pressure kind of building up. And they're kind of pointing out, well, that's probably because they're talking to Ando, you told them that they're going to have to audition for this, so they're obviously all, worked up over this whole situation. And this one teacher basically points out, you better watch the girls because this pressure is going to, basically increase and they're going to be competitive. But I never really felt that. And that was what's interesting is because despite my initial thoughts of going, crap, 4 out of 40 of them, that's pretty harsh. This is going to be a difficult battle for them. And as it started playing out, besides this one brief moment where there's this rivalry between Sawa and Sarasa, and besides Ayako not really feeling like she can compete against Ai, it was pretty mellow. And that was kind of the shocker of the whole situation. Now, the only thing I can think of is there's 2 parts to this. One, we'll see that build up next episode, and that's when we'll actually see that tension. Or 2, this is showing us that these characters have grown and they have respect for each other. Kind of a sign that the way they're actually building this particular year, allowing them to do what they want, bringing in different people, bringing in archetypes that aren't normally allowed in the school, is showing them that these students are actually, there's a lot more to them than any previous year. That these students themselves and the way that they're actually bringing them in and how they're teaching them is doing better because these girls aren't really cutthroat. I mean, like I mentioned before, the cutthroat you get is from the second years. It's from Hijiri. You don't get that in the first years. It was early on, there was a little bit of essential competition, but that's kind of gone. So that's the only thing I can think of, is they're trying to portray the fact that these students are a lot different, and that they've actually created something very unique here. I did like the scene with Akiya calling in. I thought that was a really sweet scene. But I think the best scene was by far with Ai and Sarasa. And I've really enjoyed a lot of these scenes throughout the series with Ai and Sarasa once they remove that barrier. And how much Ai is actually helping Sarasa, which is very surprising. Ai, in her wish to help Sarasa out, is really opening up out of her shell. But not only that, but you're getting these little insights into the industry itself, because Ai, despite her relationship with her mother and how much her mother was working so hard for her that she neglected her, she still learned a lot from her mother even still. And I think that's an interesting thing to really add to Ai herself. She's not just the JPX character. She's not just the man phobia character. She actually has a lot to her, and she has this knowledge that was kind of bestowed upon her by her mother, even though it seems like she doesn't want to admit it. With all that said, I was really kind of hoping that we'd get to the part where Sarasa would actually act. It is kind of scary to think that we only have 2 more episodes, so I'm guessing with the next episode we'll get Aya's performance. Obviously after that, probably Sarasa towards the later half of the episode. And it's really, I'm really curious what they're going to do for the final episode, because it doesn't really it seems like right now is the climax. And to have an entire final episode to work with, I'm really curious of how they're going to bookend this, because the concern that I really have is that obviously this is an ongoing story, and we really haven't hit like this is the pinnacle of the story. This is a turning point in the story. And so I'm really curious as what that turning point is going to be to really book in this series. But even still then, that's my thoughts on episode 11 of Kageki Shojo. I hope you guys enjoyed my impressions. If you did, leave a like down below. Comment, let me know what you thought of the episode. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon if you can. And y'all take care.